The iPad is getting some pretty big changes, and I'm not just talking about the iPad Pro here, but the entire iPad lineup. I've already talked about the iPad Pro's design changes and the sizes, but in this video, I want to talk about some fresh new leaks on some of the other changes coming to the iPads in the future. And more about those leaks right after this. If you've been following the channel for a while now, you've probably heard me talk about Paperlike. Their screen protectors have always been a favorite of mine, and they now even offer them in a bundle that also includes a cleaning kit as well as pencil grips. So yeah, if you have an iPad, Paperlike has you covered. Check it out by using the link below. And now, back to the video. So the Look has just reported that Samsung is developing new Gen 8.5 OLED displays for tablets, and that Samsung will be mass producing these for Apple in late 2024. Now, what's really interesting about this report is that they specifically said that this will be for the second gen OLED iPads. So what about the first gen then? Well, they've also talked about these, and that these would be using the Gen 6 OLED panels. The 11-inch and the 12.9-inch would be getting updated to OLED in 2024, which means that the second gen OLED panels would come in 2025. And apparently LG will be involved in this production too, so it won't be just Samsung. And Mark Gurman has reported about the switch to OLED too. Essentially, Samsung has recently acquired patents of a German OLED company to further improve their OLED display technology. So Samsung is definitely interested in improving their OLED panels all across the board. In fact, they've recently switched to OLED in some of their TVs too, so they are experimenting in that regard as well. OLED will be getting some pretty big improvements in the next few years. And I know the iPad switching to OLED doesn't seem that exciting, as loads of other Android tablets have been using OLED panels for years. Apple is, again, very late to the party, but there's actually way more to the story than it seems. But first, you're probably wondering, why is Apple so late? Well, they've always been late. For example, Apple's first OLED iPhone was the iPhone X released in 2017. Samsung already had OLED on the Galaxy S1 from 2010. And the reason why Apple is so late in this regard is because they've always been very strict in terms of color accuracy. And the initial OLED displays were known to be overly vibrant and have unrealistic colors, which is why Apple decided to wait for OLED technology to improve, for the burn-in to be fixed or not as much of an issue, and for the brightness to also be bumped, and that's when they decided to switch to OLED on the iPhone. But okay, let's say that we're in 2024, the iPads are finally switching to OLEDs. How is Apple any different when compared to Samsung and the competition? Well, the main difference will be the brightness. You see, OLED tablets today are quite dim. Samsung's Tab S8 Ultra, which is their highest-end tablet, peaks at about 420 nits. The iPad Air has a brightness of 500 nits, the 11-inch iPad Pro has a brightness of 600, and then the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which uses a mini-LED display, essentially LCD but with multiple dimming zones, that can go up to 1600 nits. No other tablet can even come this close. But we all know that OLED is just not capable of these brightness levels at the moment, so how will these new iPads be any different? Well, apparently they will be using a double-stacked OLED layer. So essentially 2 layers of red, 2 layers of blue, and 2 layers of green subpixels, essentially doubling the brightness of the display that way. So in that case, the iPad Air should easily be able to get to 800 nits with the current OLED panels, just double stacked. The iPad Pro will indeed need a more advanced OLED display to be able to get anywhere near 1600. And I think that this will solve the main issue with OLED right now, which is the lower brightness levels, while also keeping all the benefits of OLED, like the perfect black levels and the individual pixel control. And I also think that this could potentially give us some really cool unique features, like the refresh rate could then be dropped to 1 Hz instead of the 24 Hz that we have now, which would then allow us to have an always-on display on the iPad. No tablet has done this before, as far as I'm aware, so that would basically match the feature set that we have on the iPhone and the Apple Watch with the always-on functionality. So that's all great, but what about the Mac? Is the Mac getting an OLED display anytime soon? Well, according to a recent report by Russ Young, in 2024, there will be a 13-inch MacBook that will be getting an OLED display. Now, this would make sense for it to be an Air, but according to Russ Young, it might not be called the Air, so it could be a different model, but in my opinion, it makes sense for this to be a new Air. Russ also says that these dual-stack displays will be good for durability too, so that you get a longer lasting panel. And interesting enough, according to Russ, all of these devices that are getting the OLED displays will also be getting ProMotion from 1 Hz all the way up to 120 Hz. So that includes this new MacBook and the iPads. However, Ming-Chi Kuo said in an earlier report that bringing OLED to the Macs would fully depend on how the implementation goes on the iPad. So Ming-Chi Kuo believes that 2025 will be the earliest when we'll actually see OLED come to the Mac. So what about the competition? Is there anyone else who's thinking of adding these super bright OLED panels to their devices? Well, it's literally Samsung. Because you see, they're smart. Dialog reports that Samsung will be the first company to be using these dual-stacked OLED panels in their products. And that would be on the Galaxy Tab and the Galaxy Book. Now, the mass production for these OLED panels is set to begin in 2023, which means that it is quite likely that the 2023 Galaxy Tab and the 2023 Galaxy Book will come with its dual-stacked OLED display. And then Apple will have to wait a few more months until they're able to include those displays into their iPads and that 13-inch MacBook. And apparently, Samsung actually made a prototype version of this display for Apple in 2021. It was a 10.86-inch OLED display, so maybe something that was aimed for the iPad Air. This was actually rumored before that the iPad Air would switch to OLED before the iPad Pro. But apparently the whole project was halted because it was just too expensive for Samsung to manufacture. Apple needed a lot of panels, and they also wanted them cheap, which Samsung was just not able to do at that time. But all of this got me thinking, isn't Mini LED actually a better option? You see, the iPad Pro does indeed have blooming, but the MacBook Pro does it so much better. The blooming is honestly very minimal, and from my day-to-day use, I think it looks almost as good as OLED. But of course, with that extra level of brightness. So the reason why I'm saying that maybe Mini LED is a better option is because it is much cheaper to manufacture than this dual-layer OLED panel, and it is available today. Like, if Apple wanted to, they could add a Mini LED display to all the iPads and all the Macs, including the 24-inch iMac, and seriously boost the quality of their displays. And if you use something like Vivid, you can actually boost your display brightness up to 2 times or even higher, which is insanely useful outdoors. Something like this is just not doable with OLED right now. And then if you look at the TV industry, Mini LED is becoming quite big. Both LG and Samsung are using Mini LED right now. LG's Mini LED TVs are almost as expensive as their OLED models. In fact, we actually have a Mini LED TV in the office. It's an 8K LG TV, and the black levels are almost as good as on an OLED. So I'm honestly very, very impressed. And the brightness is actually significantly higher than on an OLED. That's why I think that for the time being, Mini LED is superior to OLED because of those insanely high brightness levels and the almost as good black levels. So what about the future? If in 2024, Apple will be moving most of their devices to OLED, the iPads and that MacBook and then future Macs, are there any Mini LED products coming in 2022 or even 2023? Well, we know about an Apple Mini LED display, which would be either a Studio Display Pro or a new Pro Display XDR. Now, this is set to be coming by the end of this year. There's also the updated 32-inch iMac, the iMac Pro, which is likely going to come in 2023 and feature Mini LED as well. So these are the 2 main Mini LED devices that are coming before that OLED switch. And then I believe the iPad Air will be switching to OLED first, as the level of brightness that would be required would be lower than the iPad Pros. Then of course we would have the iPad Pros and then the MacBooks. But I think the biggest question here is, what would actually happen with Mini LED in the long run? Like, after the iPad Pro and the Air get OLED, would the entry-level iPad and the iPad Mini get Mini LED, or would they simply skip to OLED? I think that only time can tell, but let me know, what do you guys think about these big changes coming to all of Apple's products in the future? And if you want to see a video on just the iPad Pro's design changes and some of the other, MagSafe and other changes, then check out this video right here. Check out our Shorts channel for quick and fun tech videos. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.